Hello and welcome back to Only Analogue. Today we're going to be taking a look at some panoramic photography through the Pentax 6.7. X-Pan's something that I've always admired but isn't the most easily accessible format. I've always wanted a Hasselblad X-Pan, but let's be honest, there's not many of us out there that can fork out that kind of cash on such a small little beast. And I'm not saying you should go out and buy yourself a Pentax 6.7 either, but they're definitely not as expensive, and it's a good workaround if you can either afford one or if you already own one. And I just want to point out that this hack is somewhat universal. You can take pieces of this information and adjust it slightly to work with your own medium format camera as well. So me and Tom shoot a lot of 6x6, we shoot a lot of 6x7 and 645, and even though I love the square format, I wanted to somehow incorporate X-Pan into my work and into my portfolio. Now, I've dabbled with X-Pan in the past, as some of you know from videos way back when, but I haven't really had the chance to experiment with it as much as I wanted. With the amazing weather that we've been having recently, it was a good excuse for me to load up Peggy, the Pentax 6.7, and venture down to Hastings to see what we could find. If you want to learn how to shoot X-Pan in your Pentax 6.7, or you just want to know the basics so you can adjust it to your own medium format camera, stick around to the end of this video and I'll show you exactly how you can do that. But without me waffling on for too long, enjoy today's video. What I love most about X-Pan photography is it gives you that sort of cinematic look that you'd expect to see from Wes Anderson films or Quentin Tarantino films. Especially in black and white, it gives you such a classic looking cinematic vibe. With X-Pan photography, I've been finding that you can create these works of art that would almost tell a story. The panoramic viewing aspect, I find that your eye has more to look for. I feel like the composition just drags you in a little bit more than a more squared format.
You gotta love film. That's why you gotta love film. Digital is blasphemy.
X-Pan is something that quite easily pulls me away from my relative and comfortable shooting style. It opens up this whole world of compositional possibilities. I find that I quite often try and fill the composition with as much detail as I possibly can. But having said that, even the most simplest shots can look absolutely incredible. I find that the negative space on the left and the right, rather than at the top and the bottom, can give you a whole different feel to your end result. Whether it's the cinematic nature of this style of shooting or not, I quite often find when I'm shooting X-Pan, I feel more like I'm documenting. Now, what I mean by that is I try to tell little stories with the compositions that I'm creating. Whether that comes across or not, I suppose, is up to the viewer to decide. I like to think that the person viewing my photography will create their own little stories from what they're seeing. Art is something that moves differently with everyone, and just because I want to convey a feeling in my work doesn't always mean that the viewer will feel the same. And that's something I absolutely love about photography, especially with these X-Pan shots. Bang. Beautiful. Perfect, mate. This is my favourite shot of the day. I'm not entirely sure why it has that gradient that fades towards the left, but I feel like it adds so much to the shot. The sky was so bright on that day, so whether it was an error on my part or something that happened in camera is beyond me. I particularly enjoyed the textures of the sea and the sand, and the silhouettes from passers-by on the beach. This is one that will definitely be going into my portfolio, and definitely be getting printed. I love this composition. Now, this is exactly what I was talking about earlier, when some of the more simple shots can be as effective as the ones with more detail. Even though there's not a whole lot going on, to me it's still very aesthetically pleasing. The black and white film gives it that vintage look, and I absolutely love this shot. One thing that I've wanted to incorporate into my work is portraits and people's stories. I feel like everyone has a story to tell, whether it's from behind the camera or in front of the camera. And I really want to try and implement that into some of my work. I got chatting to a gentleman called Eric who owns this antique store. We got into trading some stories, and after him taking interest in the Pentax 6.7, I couldn't resist asking for a portrait of him outside of his shop. This is easily another one of my favourites from the day. So as I said earlier in the video, this X-Pan hack is somewhat universal to all sorts of different medium format cameras. Of course it doesn't work in all of them, but there's quite a few that you can sort of work around and use this hack for. It does work best on a medium format camera that has a landscape orientation rather than something like a TLR, but it does still work fairly well. So today I'm using my 55mm f4. Now it's good to mention at this point that a much wider angle is going to give you a much better end result. It's not always essential, but it's often best that you use the widest lens that you have available. If you're using a camera with a fixed lens that isn't as wide, you might find that you won't get that cinematic style, but I've still seen some amazing works of art regardless of the focal length. So hello and welcome back. I hope you did enjoy today's video. So as promised in the intro of the video, I am going to show you how to load this X-Pan or load this 35mm film into your Pentax 6.7. So before we get started, there's a few little things that you're going to need. You're going to need the 35mm adapter kit. This allows you to put your 35mm film into here, into these little plugs. This will fit into your Pentax 6.7. You can pick these up from eBay or Amazon. I actually got mine 3D printed from eBay. And you're also going to need some used 120 film. You're going to need to load the paper onto the spool as if it would be exactly how you take it out of the packaging. You're going to need some tape, a pair of scissors. I like to use an old piece of 35mm film. You're also going to need a change bag and your choice of 35mm film as well. Now the change bag isn't necessary at this step, but you are going to need it to unload your film in a dark bag when you finish the roll in your Pentax 6.7. Now the first thing you're going to want to do is change your Pentax 6.7 from 10 shots to 21 shots. This will basically tell your film that you're shooting 220 film rather than 120 film, so you're going to get a lot more frames out of your 35mm. You're then going to want to open up the back of your Pentax and also change the pressure plate here to 220. You're then going to load your empty spool into your Pentax 6.7. And you're going to want your arrow to stop about here, which is usually the 220 mark on a Pentax 6.7. What you're then going to want to do is shut the lid and wind on to the first frame. I'm going to pop the back of the camera back open. And we're going to make a little mark just here. So this is where you want your film to start. Now what I normally do is come back slightly from the frame, so I'm going to start about here. So this will give your camera a little bit of that extra space when the film starts, so you don't cut off any of the 35mm film. And I'm going to take this back out of the camera. And with our used 35mm film, what we're going to want to do is line it up to about here. I'm going to draw two straight lines down the 35mm film all the way to the start point. And you want to try and get this as centered as you possibly can. You're then going to want to grab your scissors and make a cut just here at the starting line. Now remember, you want to be cutting back towards the start of the leader here. Something I like to do is just cut a little bit thinner than the lines that you've drawn. This will basically just allow you to get the film back into the canister once you've stuck it down. And then I'm just going to want to make two small cuts either side of the arrow. Whoop. And you should end up with something like this. So I'm just going to pop this little section here back onto the spool for now. We're just about ready to load up some film onto the spool that we've just made. So today's choice is Tmax 100, which is expired. Now at this point it's good to use a sticky tape that's slightly smaller. And what you're going to want to do is take off about 4 or 5 strips of this just to stick this onto your paper. Now you're going to want to line your 35mm up flush with the paper that you've just cut. And what I like to do is start at the top and work my way back. Another good thing to mention here is that you want the tape to wrap around the sides as tight as possible. Any sort of bumps or ridges on the paper when you're spooling it back into the canister might cause it to jam. I'm just going to put one last piece on the end here. And we should be good to go. So So what you're going to want to do is roll your film back into the canister. And it should look something like that. Then I'm going to want to bring your Pentax 6.7 back. We're going to connect our 35mm film to these little adapters. And we're going to place it down into our Pentax 6.7. So we're going to wind on just beyond the back of the film window here, which is where we made our original start point. You're then going to want to close your camera up and wind on until you're ready to take the first shot. So as I said earlier, when you want to take the film back out of your Pentax 6.7, it's good to note that you are going to need your change bag. This is basically going to allow you to pop your camera into the change bag and take the film out safely in the dark. So it's best to just open it up, pop out both backs and rewind it manually back into the canister before you develop. So welcome back. I hope you have enjoyed today's video. So X-Pan recently has been something that I've been really enjoying, especially with the Pentax 6.7. It's definitely something that I'm going to be doing a lot more of, whether it's outside of YouTube for personal projects or if I can somehow implement it in some of our videos in the future. Do drop a comment below if there was any of the compositions that you particularly liked. Also drop a comment if there's anything that you want to know about shooting X-Pan in the Pentax 6.7 or any other medium format cameras that you've got a rough idea of what you want to work with. Also give it a like. Please do hit the subscribe button, it means the world to us. Also hit the notification button as well, it will notify you every time we have a new video, which at the moment is every 2 weeks. But yeah, that just about wraps it up today. Thank you very much if you have made it all the way to the end. I do really appreciate it. Thank you very much, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.